Hello, you're joining us here this evening in an outside broadcast capacity, though we're inside. We're actually in a gentleman's house who will be backing on what could be a significant, very large building overlooking a number of properties here in High Road West. You may or may not be aware, but we are one of the towns that doesn't actually have just one supermarket looking to come in with a very much oversized shopping offer, but we actually have two. The one that we're dealing with today is one that seems to have stolen a march, unusually, on Tesco, and it's applying in its own right to make use of the land between the railway line, Garrison Bridge and High Road West. We do have a map here which hopefully we can show you later, but let me introduce you to Steve McCullough, who is one of the residents who will be majorly impacted by this, and perhaps you could tell us what the plan is intending to do.
Thank you, Mike. It's intending to put in a supermarket development of a sales area of 2,900 square metres. This is slightly larger than the proposed Tesco at Walton. Now, when we do have a look at the map or the plan, you'll be able to see just how big that actually is in relation to the site they're trying to fit it into.
Right, now what I've learnt, and it was particularly with regards to how much money this sort of floor area needs to turn over for that store to be viable. Now, the figure that I was given, and I was dealing in square feet, it was sort of 30,000 square feet, which sticks in my mind more readily than metres. But the figure given was it needed to turn over something like 33 to 37 million per year.
That's qualified in the planning application zone documentation in the retail guide.
Is that what they're saying? And they're confirming that's the sort of turnover they would expect to have?
I've certainly seen in excess of 20 million,
right,
which will be affecting Morrison's to the tune of 30%, Co-op to 3.3 million, and the Tesco's in town to 2.65 million.
Right. On that basis then, what I was told was that we lose something like 12 to 14 million retail sales outside of the peninsula.
Yes.
If that's the figure, and if the 34 is the right figure, they need to be viable, they need to attract an additional 20 million spend in their store, yes, which is going to be taken from somewhere else.
That's right.
And we do have a problem, I think, don't we, in that John Gummer, when he was Minister for the Environment in the Thatcher administration, did bring in some protection for existing town centres about inappropriate supermarket development that would impact and destroy those retail offers. And it was on the basis that supermarkets had to show a need, that there was a need for them.
Yes.
Now, I understand that that legislation has been watered down in subsequent years because these are big players, aren't they?
They are indeed.
They employ unbelievably expensive lawyers who go off and argue at whatever. And I believe that that particular need has been weakened, but it's not gone away completely. I understood there is still advice from our own planning authority within the district council as to whether we have a shortfall or a short provision of supermarket provision or not. And the last I heard, our shortfall had been met by Aldi's superstore down at Langer Road, which gave us yet another out-of-town offer.
Well, this is part of my confusion really, because they talk about clawback from out-of-town centres and out-of-town shopping facilities.
Right.
That doesn't necessarily mean the Tesco's at Martlesham. It does in fact include Morrison's because it's not within the town centre.
Absolutely.
Or
right.
the primary shopping area.
No.
So they are trying to draw the trade back from certainly out of town, but I don't think they realise that it's still going to affect the town itself.
It must do.
The other thing that occurred to me is they are comparing spend with the likes of Tesco's, Asda and various other outlying superstores,
Right.
that all have petrol stations attached to them.
Indeed.
So the average spend that they quote again in their retail documents is slightly higher.
Because of the fuel spend.
Potentially because, we're talking about £40 on average for people to spend more in the out of town, but clearly we haven't got that option unless you shop at Morrison's.
True.
For a petrol station. So when you do read through these documents, it does seem to contradict itself quite a lot.
Right, but that tends to be the way of it, doesn't it? And the reason we're recording this particular programme tonight is the fact that as a result of the technical officer who supports Felxstowe Town Council Planning Committee has unfortunately become unwell, the meeting that should have occurred this week was postponed. The next meeting of the Plans Committee, I understand, is on Tuesday the 9th of January 2013, and we assume will still be taking place at Walton Community Hall in Falcon Street. I believe that was where it was going to be made, but watch this space, and certainly where it's going to be held will be made known generally. But you do have an opportunity to look at these plans, which a copy should be held in the town hall. You're probably advised to phone first, because when I went there, sadly, all of the plans were with the technical officer, because she was briefing herself as a precursor to the meeting on the Wednesday that never took place. So I'm still to see them. In fact, seeing them here tonight is fascinating, because I don't know whether Steve and I could hold this up so Mark can get a reasonable feel of where we're at, because this is Garrison Lane and this is the railway bridge, and if you see the red line coming down here, this is the extent of the site. So effectively it is the land that is between the railway line and the back of the houses, but it also includes that land where we've currently used to have second-hand cars. We've been having building of wooden sheds and things there for some long time. Now, there was a pre-existing planning consent, or at least an application wasn't there for that space where the sheds were.
Yes.
And I think even that the developer was looking to overdevelop in quite a major way.
Indeed, and in fact there were going to be several houses and flats on the corner site with access and egress made onto the Garrison Lane junction for not only the residents' vehicles but waste removal, emergency vehicles, etc.
Yes, and I believe the town council had a concern at that time.
Yes,
for that, but that's nothing like this. One would assume if these folks are going to sell £36 million worth of goods, they've got to come in the back door here.
They have.
I mean, I've got no idea how many lorries that might be. I would have thought it could be quite a few.
Again, in the planning documents, they talk about the site management plan, which is this area here. And they've written in the document, which is very idealistic in my opinion,
right,
that they will control the delivery vehicles by GPS.
Yes, everybody does this.
They'll have so much notice of when the vehicle's going to turn up. They'll make sure the loading bay is clear and there'll only be one vehicle backing in at a time.
So if it snows or it's the wrong type of rain, or the dock closes or the bridge closes, then it will still be controlled at it.
Indeed, yes.
I mean, the events we all know happens because we are very dependent on that single bridge on and off of our peninsula, aren't we?
That's right.
And we know how that happens. But I was going to point out to you, perhaps I should declare an interest. I actually live further up High Road West, and ever since they've rejigged this junction at Garrison Lane by putting in the pedestrian crossings, etc., the turn right off the High Road West into Garrison Lane is such now that we have traffic that backs all the way up beyond Exeter Road on a very regular basis. And I think we're going to have to start to ask, what is the air quality of residents who are living here at the other side of High Road West? Because I'm well aware that certainly property 110 is the one there, when we have a flood, all the water flows through. So if you've got actual, the pollutants that flow and they tend to be heavier than, so they drop. They will be flowing into the housing there because of the problem that we have here. So we should really be asking for monitoring, I feel, of this road network before we agree to any other worsening of it, and this surely must be worsening.
Well, this is one of our concerns. When they estimate in their planning documentation, they will have 300 cars parked in an underground facility, or sorry, a basement level facility.
Oh, right.
Underneath the building. But again, the vehicle access will solely be for customers on railway approach.
So it's the existing entry for solar and the DIY, etc., etc.
That's right.
But do we have numbers? I mean, I can't get over this 36 million really. I mean, it's a huge amount of stuff to sell, but equally it's a huge amount of stuff to provide.
Yes.
And so you've got to deliver it, you've got to get bodies in to buy it and then take it away, haven't you? So
Yeah,
I'm not sure I don't know what solar sells during the course of a year, and I really don't know what the, but they're all pretty busy, aren't they?
They are, but just the scale of the build is probably better seen there from the size of home base in comparison to this.
Yes, what's that, 3 times?
At least.
Yeah. Now, how many floors does that go up then?
It's equivalent to a 5-storey building.
Sorry?
It's equivalent to a 5-storey building.
Right, that's 5 you said. It's,
Yes,
yeah, right,
that's
okay.
by scaling, because the planners have given me every other dimension of the build
But the height.
but the height.
I'm afraid this seems to be a terrible, terrible technique in applications, the key thing that you wish to know. So on that basis, one would assume all of the properties here would be overlooked. Would you actually be impacted on right to light? Because the light will rise here and set here, won't it?
That's right. We are south facing in our gardens here, and yes, you're right. If
without that height, you can't really calculate whether you would lose your right to light was being taken, would you?
well, the developers actually give us a plan that looks from High Road West towards the build or
Right.
proposed development, and it does exceed the roof height of this house here.
So that would that mean then you would be in shadow?
Certainly this time of the year, our complete garden would be in shadow.
Have the planners picked that up yet, or don't we know?
That has been put forward in our letter of objection, certainly.
Right.
Along with many
Certainly,
others.
I know that there's a development that is in train in the town currently, and the right to light there. A number of the residents were very concerned, and they never did get the finished height. So only time, and they'll then probably have to take legal action if they can afford so to do. Can we just tell the viewer that the application number, and as you know, or perhaps you don't, they're numbered by the year in which they're registered. So this is C12, which are all the applications that they received in 2012, and it's the 2,395th application that has been received by Suffolk Coastal District Council, and it should be available to be seen in the town hall, and the town clerk's telephone number for you to check that it's there is 282086. So I would advise you to ring that before you go, because you certainly don't want to do as I do and waste your time. Now, we have had some very interesting technical advice that WFCF has apparently made available to you.
Yes, indeed.
And I don't know whether you wanted to have a quick little run through that on the view as to what our local plan should ensure should happen and what will happen. I note that they're covering planning policy, the retail need, traffic and transport, and residential amenity. Now,
Yes.
residential amenity, when I first came to Felxstowe, used to actually be a big consideration in planning matters. It seems to have less relevance as the years go by.
Yes, I would agree wholeheartedly with that. It doesn't seem to put the importance on what is actually good for the town.
No.
It seems to be that the levy, the business rates, etc., that presumably the council get back from these large developments of supermarkets.
Well, under the new planning regime that's been introduced,
Yes.
the more they can encourage, the better kickback they get. wrong word, the consideration they get for being business friendly, though whether that's only being business friendly to new businesses and ignoring the ones you already have that you should also be trying to look after and keep in business,
Yes.
I'm not so sure, because there is no extra benefit as far as I know for those who are in existing business. It's I mean, as we all know, we are in this appalling situation in our country and throughout Europe, aren't we? There is a massive downturn, there is austerity, and it would appear to me that laissez-faire planning is being introduced on the basis that if anybody could be encouraged to lay a brick on a brick, regardless of how inappropriate it might be,
Yes.
they'd be more inclined to say yes to it than no, because of the dire economic situation we find ourselves in.
Well, I find the development itself, when you read through the National Planning Policy Framework, it seems to be written to fit so tightly to that,
Yes.
that it's laughable, really. And when they talk about which is covered many times in that document, sustain the vitality and the viability of the town.
Of the existing.
Yes.
Yes, so
Certainly
really
of the
whatever we
existing.
do should be complementary,
Indeed.
not in direct competition with.
No. So if we look at the impact on the small trader, as well as the co-op and the Tesco in the town, my feelings are people will stop at this supermarket here.
Right,
They won't be encouraged to go into the town because it will be a one-stop shop.
yes.
And I'm also not convinced that once that is built, that they won't increase their retail space inside, which is a bit of a loophole in the law at the moment, where they can put in mezzanine floors and increase their retail space.
Yes.
I have grave concerns over the traffic, of course, the noise from that traffic, the pollution, as you mentioned.
Yes, I mean that came to me on the basis of being at Exeter Road a couple of days ago, and the traffic just didn't clear, just stayed there. You know, I know it's Christmas and a lot more bodies are about, but in the mornings now, all you need is a hesitant person who's at the head of the queue, turning right, and it backs up and backs up.
Well, clearly the impact would go down Garrison Lane, potentially to Mill Lane in times of peak traffic.
Oh yes, it would.
Certainly St Andrews Road and Valley Walk would be affected.
Well, I think hopefully we might have an opportunity to go and take some video of just how heavily that junction is already in use.
Yes.
And I think for folk who don't live here on the junction of Garrison, they would be quite surprised, I think, at just how busy that is at quite prolonged periods of the day, because you have the school bulge as well at the start of the day. Now, one would assume, as in when we get our new school, then the bulge for Deben won't be as bad, but those children have still got to get to the top end of town,
Yes, of
to
course.
Aldbourne, so they've still got to travel.
That's right.
So they'll still be on the move. In fact, we might actually have more, because a lot of those coming from Langer will have to come past Garrison, whereas previously they'd have stopped at Deben and they wouldn't be a part of the traffic flow.
That's right.
So we've got too many changes happening that don't seem to be available to you and I and everybody else as to what impact that will be having on us and our traffic.
And certainly Walton, if this traffic problem becomes, as we believe it will, an area to avoid, people won't come through the high street on Walton. They will come in through Beatrice Avenue perhaps and the quieter residential areas to try and get into the town.
Yes, because your main access is through by the fire station.
That's right.
Now there is something I'd like to raise with you, but perhaps separate to this particular interview, and perhaps we could do a few 10 minutes on it. Now, what we're trying to do is to give reliable information with regards to this process of planning, and probably most of the viewers watching are not aware that our town council is purely a consultative body in this process. It has no power. All it can do is give a local view, and those who make the decisions for our town is actually the Southern Development Control Committee that sits at Woodbridge. Now, what we do have is the option and the ability to make representation to both our town councillors and our district councillors with regards to the suitability of this particular application. And when the town council itself sits, or its plans committee sits, you as a resident have every right to attend that meeting, receive the briefing from the technical officer, but unfortunately we've never changed the rules here in Felixstowe to enable somebody to speak on behalf of the community for and against, so you will not be able to speak. All you can do is listen. But what that does do gives you an idea of what the positions are that particular councillors may have taken. Some of those may be on development control at the districts. And one of the big problems we seem to have is that a decision made in Felixstowe seems to change 180 degrees when it gets to Woodbridge, yes, because of late advice that comes in from the planning officers to that development control, and that itself is minuted. It's not allowed to be televised or whatever, but you are able to speak at the development control meeting, which you're not able to do here, but you are restricted to 3 minutes.
That's correct, yes.
And you've got to do a lot of convincing in 3 minutes, and it is actually a David and Goliath competition, I'm afraid.
I'm
but
sure
you've got to crack on for the community.
Oh, without a doubt. I think it's something that's worth fighting for. We can't let a large supermarket go ahead like this to the detriment of the town.
No.
In my opinion. Now, if people have access to the internet, of course, they can see the application C12-2395 and all the planning documents on that.
And that is at Suffolk Coastal.
Yes, it is.
So
yes, Suffolk Coastal.
Do we have an email address or a website for them?
Well, the objections, if you feel strongly enough to write the objections in, can be sent by email to d.c.admin@suffolkcoastal.gov.uk and to the head of planning services at Melton Hill Woodbridge.
Who is Philip Ridley?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah. Now, if you need any further information, you have every right to ask the planning department to clarify some of your concerns. Before you can, if you wish, say that you are taking advice before you make a response, to keep your response open. I understand that this should be a 13-week planning process, and that means that the local authority, whoever it may be, is obliged to deal with this matter within 13 weeks from the day that it is lodged by the applicant. So the fact it's been lodged before Christmas means that immediately you and the rest are going to lose certainly the Christmas and New Year bit out of that process, and this sadly often happens.
This particular time period will close on January the 3rd. That's the time that objections will have to be in by to both the town and the district council.
So it's really, the town won't be considering this, and this really is where the idiocy of the system is apparent. The town, people living here, won't have the benefit of knowing what their own councillors have said because it's been deferred because of illness, which is fine, but it's a very unforgiving system, isn't it? In that the councillors, we won't know their opinions until the 9th. And this will have been closed for 6 days. So I would have thought what you could ask is that in view of the exceptional circumstances, that period of response be extended, and that wouldn't be unreasonable.
I think you're quite right, Mike. I think that is a reasonable request, given the potential detrimental consequences that this proposal puts forward.
And I think we'll wrap up now if we may, but what we will do is there are some other wider considerations which perhaps we can return to in the new year, and we may grab a few more minutes with Steve on the basis of how our town could actually be regenerated in a much more inclusive way than this piecemeal grabbing a bit and perhaps doing a totally unsuitable development. We should really be doing something that delivers a lot more for the benefit of not only the town but the peninsula as a whole. So thanks very much for sharing your time with us, and we will keep you informed as much as we can as this matter progresses. Bye bye.